Good morning. Okay. First of all, my name is Bilal Ayoub. I'm an engineering professor at the University of Maryland, College Park, and I co-chair the task force, the ASCE NOAA task force on adaptation and climate resilience of engineering practice. I'd like to welcome you to the ASCE NOAA workshop, and it's my great pleasure and honor to be to chair this workshop. It will be for 2 days. And what I'd like to do to start with in this introductory section is to give you some context and history of how we got here, because we are at a critical stage of trying to define the future few years. This is part of the session that's shown on the screen in here. So I'll spend about maybe 10 minutes, and then I'll pass it to Tom Smith, the Executive Director of ASCE, and then we will continue to the next, the main speaker that we have for this segment, the president of ASCE. With that, I tried looking at both ASCE and NOAA in terms of their strategic plans. There are 2 items. I tried to keep it short, but there are 2 items that are common between the 2. One is dealing with hazards and risks, and that's certainly of interest to ASCE, and it is of great interest for NOAA. And second is the focus on communities and the safety related to communities. So I have those highlighted in there. And based on that, there are a few items which are basically a focus for the task force that are listed in here. You could see the word hazard in red because it used to be climate, but we have it now as hazard. But basically our focus is on hazards, which has been for engineers for many decades, is future hazards. We design our systems for the future. And basically I try to highlight key items in here that we would like to strengthen the connections between the civil engineering practice or engineering practice in general and NOAA science. And we would like to expand the mutual understanding of the shared needs and so on. And we'd like to establish priorities, which we've done in previous workshops. And at the very end, we'd like to get this to an operational level through having a flow of information, basically from NOAA science-based to engineering practice that will be sustained for the future. Now, ASCE, I have a couple of slides about each one because we have a mixed group in here from NOAA and ASCE. But ASCE, basically the primary products that will impact the engineering practice in here, among many others, is ASCE codes and standards and manuals of practice. And these are examples of what we have that are of primary focus, among other documents. All of this will fit into the pyramid that you'll see on the side, where we have basically a report, there is at the very base is published articles which receives peer review. Then we have reports by committees and manuals of practice. And at the very end, the review process and the consensus goes up until we have standards at the very end there. What I did, I brought some sample documents. I have them in the back table that I'd like to, if you have the time, you could look at them. There is Manual of Practice 140 and 144. Often I receive questions as being from academia, do we cover that in undergraduate and graduate education? So I brought a couple of textbooks, and they are my textbooks, but there are other competing products you can look at. But these are, it gives you an idea of the way we cover the materials, and this has been in use for many years. Now, this chart shows that ASCE with its institutes shown on one side, and this is not a complete list of all the institutes, at least they are the institutes that we have been interacting with. And then there is NOAA on the other side. The Climate Program Office fits within research at NOAA, which fits within the organization of NOAA. We convened workshops in the past. In 22, our first workshop, there's a report on that. It's a NOAA report. It's a joint report, but published by NOAA. And then we had the summit, the 2023 summit, ASCE NOAA summit, at the high leadership level. And then we had the second workshop, which was last year in 24. And there is a report on this, and currently this workshop in 25. Now, NOAA, in its pursuits of to meet different needs, there is this matrix, which I took from one of the presentations of NOAA. It shows that the focus could be local, regional, or global, And it could be all the way from daily, weekly, all the way to annual and decadal. I mean, in engineering, we are interested in a good number of those, but in building infrastructure, we are looking at the longer term. And certainly, we would like it to be at the local level if we're designing specific buildings. Policy making might require regional and beyond. So you could see that a lot of the products in here are of great interest to us as civil engineers. I know this slide is a little bit busy, but I spent a good amount of time trying to give you a timeline, right, of what happened. And keep in mind that this is a biased timeline based on my own interactions and experiences and working with a good number of you. And I'm happy to see so many familiar faces for many, many years. Starting from the left, my interest in this started in around 2009. And there was not much funding. Things were not moving in that direction. We had a paper on risk analysis in the journal Risk Analysis in 2012 that was done by undergraduate students. The Washington Post picked up one of the figures in the paper and put it in a quarter page in the Metro section of the Washington Post. It was picked up by 300 media outlets, Financial Times, New York Times. I received, this is all not funded undergraduate student work, right? Received tremendous interest from all over the place. But the reason I bring this up, because I connected with the late Dr. Dick Wright. He was pursuing that area, trying to set up a committee, and he saw, although we were colleagues on campus, he was a research professor, but we connected because of this article. We ended up, the short story, that we ended up basically working together to form the Committee on Adaptation to a Changing Climate, and we have the chair of the committee in here, as well as other past chairs. You could see the timeline of the committee in the middle figure in there, and it shows the different products that were produced. In addition to Dick, we had Ted Vinson, and of course Dan, and many others who were involved in all of this. The manual of practice was 140 when 2018 was a product of CAC, Committee on Adaptation to a Changing Climate, but it wasn't funded activity, and it was out of the sense of urgency that we have to put some document forward for the engineering practice. And that was the product in there. Before that, we had, if you remember, the CDRM, the Council in Disaster Risk Management, which was rolled under the Infrastructure Resilience Division, which I worked with Marcia and others to form that division. So all of this produced the ASCE 2012 document on the impact of sea level rise on Washington, D.C. And we had a series of papers that are all focusing on Washington, D.C. in terms of temperature, extreme heat, and so on. And this really brought the awareness to great level, including with the D.C. government, and we had a special workshop with that. At the very end, all of this, which is unfunded work, including interacting with Alice Hill, who was at the time, during President Obama, she was on the National Security Council with big interest in this area, and she promoted what we are doing tremendously, and her role was very critical in this. All of this, really, there was a turning point where we started to get the funding and formalizing it by the ASCE NOAA task force, where you could see on the right now the part which is what we have been dealing with since around 2021, I'll say, where an agreement was signed between ASCE, UMD, and NOAA to create this task force. We had the ASCE Inspire, and now the summit, which is in 2025. So I thought just to share with you this timeline. This is from the summit. If you look at that figure closely, you'll see past, current, and future presidents in that figure, in that photo. And basically, you know, we did have, this is when we signed the agreement between ASCE and NOAA, which is, in my opinion, was a critical turning point. And a lot of it because of the effort of Ben D'Angelo, who was at the time at USGCRB when we interacted with him during the unfunded stage, and then he helped to shape this relationship and advance it tremendously. There is an MOU. It's available online. You could just Google ASCE NOAA MOU and read the details. But basically, it defines responsibilities for ASCE NOAA and joint responsibilities. And we are through the task force, we, I think, fulfilled or working on fulfilling a good number of those items that are listed in there. I'm not planning to go through this one. I just want to show you the wealth of activities that we've done by year. There's 2022, 23, and 24. the hazard focus of extreme temperature, rainfall, and wind, which is in the table at the top, always we adopted a cycle, which is user to user. So we are driven by actionable items. We'll define what are the needs of the user, concern on precipitation and flooding, then we'll loop back to make sure that we can deliver the products that will help in that regard. The same thing with the ASCE codes and so on. So this user-to-user cycle was really critical for us in making sure that the products at the very end are relevant. This is my run. So I thank you, and I'll pass it to Tom here.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Bilal. I can't thank Bilal enough because he's been so instrumental in the reason why we're here today. Is you heard it was seems like just yesterday that we were signing that MOU back in 2023 with Administrator Spinrad. Maria Lehman, one of our past presidents here, was here for that as well, and so we've made a lot of progress since that time. This actually all goes back about the same time when we were adopting a new strategic plan. And the vision in that strategic plan talks about harmonizing our built and natural environments. So we know how important it is that we connect the engineering with the science, the earth scientists, and that's been part of what we've been trying to accomplish with our collaboration with NOAA. And I think we've done a very good job of that over the years, as you've heard from Bilal. There's been a lot of progress that's been made. It was just a couple of weeks ago, 2.5 weeks ago, that we were here in the same room with a number of the same folks here from NIST, where we were working on hazard reduction as well, future hazards. So we talk about climate and future hazards and making sure that we're connecting that with our standards. So we had to spend a lot of time doing that with NIST and a series of workshops that we'll be doing another one within the next month as well. So I see Terry McAllister from NIST. She was here just a couple of weeks ago. She'll be here in a few more weeks as well, continuing to work with our colleagues at NIST. So thank you to them as well as our colleagues at NOAA. We look at our mission to sustainably advance and protect the public health, safety, and welfare of all. And all of this is rooted in our Code of Ethics, which goes back to 1914, but about 5 years ago, Robin Kemper's here, who was one of our past presidents who helped lead that initiative to revise really comprehensively review our Code of Ethics. And we look at one of the stakeholders is the built and natural environment. And we look at the 4 principles. One of them talks about safety, resilience, and sustainability of our infrastructure. So we know that these are responsibilities of engineers, and in order to do that, we have to connect the engineering and the science. When we look at our advocacy work, and you've seen all the great publications that have come out, the standards work is critical because this is where we're putting it into law, and the manuals of practice on sustainability and climate and hazard reduction. When we go out and we survey our members and we get input on what should be our priority initiatives when we're advocating on Capitol Hill, and you probably know that this year we released a report card on America's infrastructure. And when we look at that, we looked at what our solutions. Well, when we look at what are the key issues we should advocate on, 2 of the 8 are, number 1 is climate and hazards mitigation, and number 2, environmental stewardship. So those are key issues that our members, 160,000 plus members worldwide, when we ask them what we should be advocating for on Capitol Hill, those are 2 of the 8 issues. So we're spending a lot of time on those issues. Obviously, those are, when we look at our advocacy work on the Hill, we need to make sure that legislators understand the importance of these issues. So there have been a lot of concerns about that. We have written quite a few letters. We've written, if you look at the letters we've written this year, we've written over a dozen letters in support of NIST, in support of NOAA, in support of FEMA, in support of NSF, in support of the National Climate Assessment. So we've got a variety of letters. You can see all of those on our website because we want to make sure that everybody understands the importance of this work. And we need this as engineers. We need the science community to be supported. We need to have research dollars because that's what's going to drive industry forward. That's what's going to increase our prosperity as a country and as a planet. So we're spending a lot of time on this. Again, those are our priority issues. Also in 2023, we released ASCE 73. That is our sustainable infrastructure standard. Back in 2010, ASCE teamed up with the American Public Works Association, American Council of Engineering Companies, and the Harvard Zofnass program, created the Institute for Sustainable Infrastructure. Many of you in the room, I suspect, have done Envision training and it's certified as an Envision sustainability professional, or you might be using Envision on projects to certify projects around the country and around the world. We think that's increasingly important. So we were very, the ASCE 73 is the standard. It went through the consensus ANSI accreditation process, and we ensured that that was not easy to do, but that standard itself has been endorsed by the World Federation of Engineering Organizations, UPADI, which is the Pan American Federation of Engineering Organizations, ASEC, the Asian Civil Engineering Coordinating Council. Organizations representing 30 million engineers worldwide have endorsed ASCE 73, the Sustainable Infrastructure Standard, which runs parallel to the Envision rating tool. So we're really trying to drive sustainability into infrastructure. So we spent a lot of time. We released this report card on America's infrastructure. We focused mostly on solutions, not the problems. We have a grade C, so we've made some progress, and that's really good. We should all be proud of that. We've done a lot of advocacy work to get some legislation across and some funding at the federal level, but also we've seen state and local support. That's great, and we've raised the grade. But we focus mostly on solutions, and one of the 3 solutions that we focus on is prioritizing resilience. So, that's one of the things we're trying to drive through Congress and through the public. We released, last year, an IMAX film called Cities of the Future. It runs parallel to our future world vision, where we can immerse you into a virtual reality platform so you can see what it's like to be in a future city. We're trying to make sure everybody understands, though, when we're investing these dollars, we have to do it in a way that is resilient and future-looking. So we know we're designing infrastructure. If you look at ASCE 73, it talks about life cycles, and we're looking at designing infrastructure for 75, 100 years out. So we have to consider future conditions. What are future hazards? We need to be prepared for that. The only way we can be prepared for that is if we connect engineers with science. And that's where NOAA and NIST are so critical for everything that we're doing here at ASCE. Also, just a couple of years ago, we released this Pathways to Resilient Communities. And this just kind of shows a lot of different publications. Bilal just went through a lot of them that ASCE produces to focus on resilient communities. And again, if you look at this document, you'll see the connection between ASCE and NIST and NOAA and FEMA and USGS. These are critically important if we're going to be successful in protecting the public health, safety, and welfare. So I want to thank everybody here. This is extremely important work that we're doing. I can't think of anything more important to the future generations, not just our current generation. And I look forward to this discussion today and tomorrow, and to future workshops, again, in collaboration with NOAA. It's been a wonderful partnership. It's my pleasure to introduce our president-elect, Marcia Anderson-Bomar. I'll say Dr. Marcia Anderson-Bomar. Just within the last several years, she got her PhD. She's got a very lengthy bio. I mean, it's really remarkable, the things that she has accomplished in a very short period of time. So she's really been an amazing leader for ASCE. She's been a past president of our Transportation Development Institute, Institution of Transportation Engineers. She can do training on Envision. If anybody would like that, she can do that herself. Not only, she's really walking the talk, and not just being an EMVSP, Envision Sustainability Professional, but actually training others to do that as well. So she's pretty much dedicated her life to advancing this profession and this society is in her role. So I want to just thank her for that. And I know from here she'll be heading to our student championships. And I know a lot of you were with us at our education summit a week ago, where we're trying to transform our education process. So we're trying to do that also with our students. So she'll be doing that this weekend as well. So let me introduce Marcia Anderson-Bomar. Thank you.
You always put the short girl after the tall guy, right? So, good morning, everybody. It's really a privilege and an honor to be here with you. You have just been immersed in the big world of all the subjects that are important to us around climate hazards, resilience, but I want to focus in a little bit on data as I welcome you this morning. So I know I don't look old enough, but in 1969, when NEPA was enacted, I had just started college, and I grew up in Brooklyn, New York. And Brooklyn Law School, which was a very, and I think still is a very prestigious law school, decided that they would teach a class on this new law. So as a freshman in college, I ventured off and decided this sounded like something important that I needed to know about. So I took the class at Brooklyn Law School to learn all about that legislation. And I think that that really embedded something in me and the way that I've looked at the world ever since then. In the same time frame, my dad was working for New York State Department of Transportation. He made a job change, a career change later in life, and he was working as a right-of-way agent for the New York State DOT. And for those of you who were around at that time, you may remember that a truck fell through the deck of the West Side Highway. And suddenly the city, the state, and the federal government had to collaborate to figure out how they were going to solve the problem because, traffic in New York City cannot abide, a big break in their system like that. So with NEPA coming on board and this crisis of transportation, my father was put in a very unique position to be that person who was the liaison among the city, state, and federal governments. And he used to come home and tell me stories, and they produced the first NEPA document that showed an inboard solution and an outboard solution and the impact on the river and the impact on the communities. And it was the first time I had really ever thought about infrastructure and how infrastructure really impacts people's lives, how it impacts businesses. So as a late teenager, I really had my first exposure to a lot of the topics that are really important to us that you are all working so hard on every single day. In my own personal journey, I became a transportation engineer. And one of the areas that I did a lot of work in was in travel demand modeling. So I really developed a tremendous respect for data, the availability of it, the quality of it, the quantity of it, and later started my own company that was a data collection, data management, data warehousing organization that dealt with a lot of different types of infrastructure, with asset management, with transit systems, with roads and highways. And so over time, I really immersed myself in that data world to understand how we think about and also how we predict things so that we know that we're building things that are building infrastructure that is great for the future. And so, years later, I had the great good fortune. I was in charge of one committee, Bilal of another, and we had the opportunity to bring it all together into the Infrastructure Resilience Division of ASCE. And that really, I would say, really catapulted me into a much deeper understanding and appreciation for the world that we're living in now, or that we were in then. It's a little crazier now than it ever has been. And it's really, I think the message I want to leave with you today is the work that you are all doing is so vitally important. The infrastructure that we're building now, we know it's going to last till my grandchildren have their grandchildren. And so we have to make really good decisions about what we build, how we build it, where we don't build it. I spent last week in New York City, and there are some really amazing projects underway that are specifically geared to addressing some of the future challenges, but trying to get our arms around them now, dealing with sea level rise and a lot of other climate conditions. We saw, I don't know if you saw in the news yesterday, the roads in the Midwest that have buckled because of the extreme heat that they were not designed to handle. So it's not just in our world anymore, it's in everybody's world that these images, these stories, these insights are really kind of smacking everybody in the face. And I think that's a good thing, because I think as the public in general gets to understand what we have known about, what we have been concerned about for a long time, I think the support for the future thinking will only grow, that our communities will support the kind of work, the kind of thinking that we're doing here. So I want to welcome everybody. I want to thank you for the great work that you do every day. I want to encourage you, whatever is happening in the crazy world around us right now, please don't lose your focus. We may have challenges getting to some of the data. We may have challenges collecting or warehousing some of the data, but let's make sure that we collectively find the path to make sure that we have the core information that we need to keep making the good decisions, to keep building the important standards, to keep designing things properly so that we have a really bright future. So thank you for being here. Thank you for allowing me to participate with you. I look forward to learning a lot over the next 2 days, and I hope you have a great event here. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Marcia, Dr. Marcia. We have time for Q&A. I mean, the intent was to have remarks from the ASCE president and then, open it for questions. So we have time for questions. You could also direct questions to Tom, if it's okay with you, and with me, to me, and we'll try to answer those. Any questions or comments? It's a quiet group this morning. From online as well? How many do we have online? Is that 63? Okay. Yes. Yeah, John.
Hold on one moment.
This is for the benefit of the people online as well.
Yeah, heard a comment about the advocacy happening and those 12 or so statements. I've read a couple of them, or letters in support of continued federal funding. I might just be interested to hear a little bit more about that, given some of the budget recommendations we're seeing coming out of the White House, 50%, more than 50% cuts to NSF, large cuts to NIST, USGS, FEMA.
Yeah, that has certainly been a concern, and Caroline Sevier, who is the managing director for our government relations team, is also here. I just want to introduce her because she runs our DC office and has been very instrumental in a lot of the advocacy work and working on making sure that we're presenting those letters. So, yeah, we spent a lot of time advocating for increased funding. We've been very concerned about the reductions in funding, both at the at every different level. On the labor side and on the research side. So whether it's NSF or FEMA, the BRIC program, we had a lot of concerns about that. We had a lot of concerns about the National Climate Assessment. We had a lot of concerns about, again, NOAA funding, NIST funding. So we've been writing letters to the administration and Congress, making sure that they understand how important those investments are. We also teamed up, we brought together we convened the Electrical Engineering Society, IEEE, mechanical engineers, the chemical engineers, the mining engineers, and we all together wrote a letter in support of NSF funding. And we talked about how that money is not just being used in academia, but how it's actually, how it's benefiting industry and the different technologies that have been advanced as a result of that, and how important it is to the country, to our global competitiveness, and to our quality of life, and to our prosperity. So we're trying to make sure that that message is being carried consistently to Congress and to the administration. We also have a letter that's going out on workforce. We're part of an engineering workforce consortium with the American Council of Engineering Companies and the American Public Works Association. We have our own task force on workforce that Maria Lehman chairs. And we just held a summit a month ago, and we've got a letter that's going to President Trump about that, about the importance of investing in our workforce. So we're trying to we're trying to pull together coalitions, and we're trying to be very consistent in our messaging. Again, this is rooted in our code of ethics, in our strategic plan, in all of the publications that Bilal has referenced there. So we're trying to make sure that we're advancing this in coalitions. And Caroline, if there's anything I missed, feel free to chime in, or Bilal, or Maria, of course, has been involved in this, or Marcia. Lots of folks here have been involved in this. And if you see other opportunities where you think we can help and advocate more, we also push out. Every week we have This Week in Washington an email that goes out and tells people what's happening on the Hill, and we have key contacts so that they can write letters to Congress that we pre-write for them oftentimes, and then they're also sending messages about the need for a sustained investment in our infrastructure. We can't fall back. We talked about how our grade has gone from a C- to a C, incremental small change, but we still got 9 Ds out of 18 in that report card. And if we don't sustain, and we did an economic study also, we released last year to show that if we don't sustain that investment, here's what it costs American families, and here's how that will go up by an additional $700 from the $2,000 that we pay today in the hidden tax if we don't continue the sustained investment. So those are all messages that we're trying to push as hard as we possibly can as the trusted engineers, a trusted voice on this. So did I miss anything, Caroline?
You didn't miss anything, but I would just add, thank you. I would also just add that our team is actually in the process right now of meeting with every single House Appropriators Office, every single Senate Appropriators Office to share that message, discuss what these dollars are actually going toward to make sure we are preserving that research and development agenda across all federal agencies. And we also have a lot of I'll say new partners, old partners for ours, but new partners in this space. ASCE also is getting much more involved, specifically as it pertains to NOAA funding. We had a meeting with them last week on this, and they actually just shared a letter with me yesterday afternoon where they want to start doing more joint efforts in terms of NOAA appropriations going forward, and to start going up and doing their own congressional visits and really pushing appropriators as well. So we're actually seeing that tent widen a little bit in terms of who's getting engaged in this space.
And if I can add, ACEC is, I was at their Hill visits, 3 weeks ago. Time flies when you're having fun, and we were talking about that to representatives across the board. But the thing I can tell you from the National Infrastructure Advisory Council, we have not had a meeting or connections with CISA, because CISA is still kind of in a state of disrepair with this administration. But what I can tell you is that the 2 documents that are relevant and pertinent to the discussion here that NIAC approved in draft form that are still up on the website. The connection is broken, but they're still up on the website. One had to do with the workforce of the future, and there's a lot of good material in there, and it speaks to a lot of these issues. And so we've been pushing that through various administrative offices as well as congressional offices. I can tell you on that piece that there's, it's very interesting because there was over 100 briefers on best practices around the country and how important it is to continue that pipeline. And with what we're seeing with international students now, is it's causing all kinds of havoc on that as well. On the other report that we did last year in December was reimagining response, recovery, and resilience. That report is pretty much the basis of what the House Transportation and Infrastructure Committee put forward of what FEMA should look like. A good part of that report was brought into that legislation about, because we all knew FEMA needed help. The Stafford Ave and FEMA were not designed for what we're dealing with right now. And so we need to get smarter about that. So, that's a place that we're already trying to get some traction. And, Caroline and I have been working together so that they have that material when they're going on the Hill. So we aren't just, walking away, even though in front of you stands a non-male, because female is one of the words we can't use anymore.
I will also mention both Maria and Norma Jean Mattei, who's in the room, is one of our past presidents as well. Both serve on the National National Infrastructure Advisory Council appointed by President Biden.
I have a question from the online audience.
I have a comment.
Okay.
Continuing in the same item, I'd like just to bring in the academic perspectives. On campuses, there has been, of course, cuts of grants and projects in the middle of the projects and so on. And additionally, there has been placement of caps on indirect costs. Indirect costs are justified through the books following, basically procedures, accounting procedures approved by the government to have those indirect costs for facilities, for support staff, and so on. So caps of 15% and 10%, some arbitrary caps, it does hurt academic institutions. The impact on workforce development is tremendous. We have students who are cut off from grants and so on, and we have to figure out ways to get them to finish their degrees. So the impact on the academic side has been tremendous, affecting careers of people, faculty and students as well. And that one, so this is one item. The other item, there are some efforts that has been going within the government that they were terminated in the middle. And I'll bring just one as an example, and I'm sure you could think of others. The National Nature Assessment, which has been ongoing, it was almost 50% complete, and it was terminated. There is 185 authors involved in it. And basically, that effort is going outside the government, funded by foundations, still reviewed possibly by the national academies. And I'm involved in that to make sure that National Nature Assessment will end up being, will be released. It will be the first nature assessment. And there are many worldwide, in New Zealand, other countries. There are such assessments do exist, and they have all to come together for a global assessment. So I mean, the impact has been, there are efforts. There are basically, people are not giving up on some of those items. There are efforts to figure out alternate ways of doing our business.
Yeah, I'll mention quickly, the National Nature Assessment, ASCE was very involved in that. We convened the civil engineering community to provide input into that assessment, working with Heather Tallis. Chris, who's here from NIST, he and I were on a panel just earlier this year at the National Academy of Sciences on nature-based solutions. And we're working now, as Bilal mentioned, to see if we can continue that effort. So, and I know we have a meeting this week to try to figure out how do we preserve a lot of this data, because we need that data, and ASCE can play a role in that.
Online, this might be a question for Caroline as well. ASCE is doing great advocacy with Congress, but what about the Office of Management and Budget? Or is ASCE doing any advocacy there?
We have not had any recent meetings with OMB with the new administration. We have done some outreach and just have not gotten a good response at this point, but that is something we will continue to pursue.
Thank you. And I have another question here. What are the biggest obstacles to building resiliently and considering future conditions?
Well,
Yeah, stay tuned for the next 2 days.
yeah. I mean, I could answer that in two different ways. One, with the largest impact, I'll say, is building codes, right? Building codes, if we implement what we are trying to do and get it into building codes, which is basically an ongoing effort through ASCE, the ASCE 7 Standards Committee and others, that will have an impact on every project and so on that requires, that will end up adopting the standard that will go into the building code. Now, in specialty projects, I'll say what could be done about it is informed owners who will require it and put the burden, basically shift the burden to the engineer. They need to figure out how I can make my project, my highway grid, whatever it is, to be resilient for future conditions.
And just one quick point on the ASCE 73, there's a heavy focus in that standard on life cycle assessments. And that is certainly one of the obstacles we find, that there's a focus on upfront costs and cutting ribbons as opposed to evaluating the asset over its life cycle and what those costs are. And so trying to change the thought process and really communicating the importance of that to the public and to policymakers. Oh, yeah, Maria.
The other thing that I'd like to add is one of the things that ASCE did and that we're working on moving forward is we met with the financial industry actually in this room in December. And the idea is that about 70% of the work in the United States on the state and local and authority level is done with tax-exempt municipal bonds. And partnering with the financial community to get a resilience dividend. We're going to talk about this tomorrow in a panel. But basically, to circumvent the codes, because there are many communities that are 20 and 30 years behind in the standard they have adopted for their code, and they don't have the political will to move forward. Florida's a great example of this, right? They put all kinds of rules in place based on the Surfside collapse, as far as structural integrity assessments and things like that. And we were about 3 hours away from the Senate in Florida when they pulled a bill to get rid of the professional engineering license in Florida. And they still haven't passed their budget, so they may still pass that, okay? And so who's going to do it and based on what? So if the financial community who's bringing the money to the table says, thou shall, thou shall. And so we want to be able to engage them at a much better level to make sure that we are not getting resilience washing and that we're actually getting the investment that will last for however long. When you're bonding for a few years, that's not a problem, but when you're bonding for 50, they're interested because they want to make their money back.
And while she's passing the microphone, I'll quickly mention that we are also very active on the licensure front. We're part of the Alliance for Responsible Professional Licensure. We're teaming up with accountants, the landscape architects, the architects, to make sure that everybody understands the importance of licensure for our public health, safety, and welfare. We're advocating strongly for permitting reform. I mean, who's against that? We want to make sure that we streamline the process, and nobody wants bureaucracy, but that's not the way to do it in terms of licensure. We want to maintain these high standards because the stakes are so high.
This may be back to Caroline. I'm building on Justin and all the conversation around that. You know, doing key contact and all that, and we get our standard letters back from our elected officials. And maybe you can't answer it yet because you just said you're going to start some more one-on-one visits. Do you have really any insight what impact our letters from ASCE or key contact? Are we making a difference, or we just don't know yet? A positive difference.
So I would say there is a positive difference. What I would say is not necessarily about related to the letters themselves, but from conversations we are having with House and Senate appropriators, is that they are not on the same page as the administration when it comes to a lot of these funding cuts. So the conversations we have had have been pretty positive. They understand the impacts and the importance of these programs, and very similar to what we see with a lot of administrations' priorities in their budgets, that Congress is kind of going to do their own thing. I think the bigger concern that we have right now with this administration is that we've just seen this rescission bill going out, where they're going to be clawing back some NPR funding and some other funding that the administration doesn't like. And that's a very unusual move. So as we're going forward, is this something that they're going to make as a more frequent, that Congress passes appropriations, the administration doesn't like certain things, and now we go in and do a rescission bill and claw some of those dollars back, or is this more of a one-off thing as we've been looking to the last appropriations bills? So it's really a matter of the will of Congress at this point to really enforce the appropriations that they are going to be setting. But again, from the conversations we've had with them, they seem to be supportive, but do they remain supportive if they pass these appropriations and then we hear from the administration 6 months down the line they want to see some of that stuff rescinded? That's an open question.
Yeah, that's the question. Do they have the will, and do they have the actual authority and capability and strength?
They certainly have the authority, but the will's
Well,
an
that's a
open
good question these days, I think.
Well, we're trying to make sure that they have the will. We're trying to give them the ammunition that they need so that they have the data that they need. And we're trying to make sure it's coming from every possible front. I'll be on the Hill on Thursday. JQ's here from the National Institute of Building Sciences. We'll both be over there doing a presentation on resilience and the report that came out from NIBS that focuses on moving, that they provide to Congress each year a report, and this one focuses on resilience and lifelines and things that we're advocating for. So we're trying to make sure this message is coming from every possible front so that everybody understands the importance of it.
Thanks. ASCE is an organization that has existed and evolved in a certain ecosystem. And whether it's a permanent change or not, that ecosystem has changed. Now, a lot of the comments here today have been talked about how is ASCE looking out and reaching into that new ecosystem. But I guess I'd like to ask the question, internally, what is ASCE doing to be a different organization so that it perhaps is more in tune with the new ecosystem that it's actually trying to exist within? And so that's not just about, well, I'm going to talk to more people doing the same things before. How am I going to evolve internally to, in fact, make sure that I survive and I don't become the next FEMA or whatever? And I'm actually excited to see Marcia step up to answer that.
Yeah, so hold on to your hats, stay tuned, because we have a lot of initiatives that we're getting ready to launch to really transform our organization. We know that the education system needs to be transformed The way, a lot of places are still teaching the way I learned back in the dark 30s, back in the late 1900s. With technology, with so much that has changed, curricula have to be changed, but not only the curriculum, the way we teach, the methodologies that we used to teach, the generations that are coming into school now learn differently than we learned, so that has to be transformed. The length of time that the current generations are willing to spend in school is different than when we went to school. So finding paths to get them all of the education they need, perhaps a little more creatively. One of the schools that was visited last year, Brooklyn Tech, they teach college classes aligned with civil engineering foundational material in high school, so the students graduate with an associate's degree and only need 2 more years to get to their bachelor's. So finding partners, finding creative ways to deliver the educational material is critical. But we're looking at a lot of other things that we do, ways that we do our own work as an organization to transform those. We have a big initiative that it's I would say a multifaceted initiative. AI is a big thing, and there are different ways in which it touches civil engineering. So we have to be on top of the ethics of utilizing AI, because we know that there are questions about the quality of what you get from an AI tool. There is also the perspective that we're looking at is we have a lot of content. How do we want to make our content available in the future? What is the relationship of AI to the content that we own? And how do we, in some cases, how do we look at monetizing that? As the world evolves and open access may continue, right now it seems like it's a little bit on hold, but it may at some point continue to move down the path where content is required to be readily available. So we lose that stream that we currently have, or at least our stream of revenue is damaged for the content that we're currently selling. Is use of an AI tool to make some of our content available in a safe and ethical way, a way to monetize what we have. So those are just a couple of initiatives that we have going, but we're very steeped in looking at the future and figuring out quickly. We're doing a lot of things now with task forces that we used to do with these committees that went on forever. And now it's a task force that has 3 months or 6 months to study and come up with answers for us. So we're trying, we know we don't have time to wait. We don't have years to wait to make changes. So that's the world we're living in right now. So hold on to your hat, because things are going to start to move pretty quickly. Thanks.
And if I can add to that, a couple of things. You probably noticed we just had an election, and so we have a new president-elect, Carol Haddock. But we also had on our ballot a constitutional amendment, and that consolidated our membership grades. And part of the thought process behind that is to be more inclusive and to better engage the broader infrastructure community, and because that's the only way we're going to accomplish the things that we're trying to accomplish. We're trying to think less in silos. So, and you've probably heard about our 175th anniversary is taking place in 2027. At that time, we're going to be having an ASCE 2027 conference where we're consolidating a lot of those individual technical conferences that we hold. We think that's important to get everybody thinking less in a siloed approach and more of a systematic enterprise level approach when we look at infrastructure. And so that's being done very intentionally, not just for ASCE, but for the profession. And so we're also within ASCE on our staff team. We're working less in silos and more cross-divisionally. Like Brian Parsons here, who used to only work with EWRI, you know, he's really working with the Water Institutes and is also handling a lot of our global activities and outreach. So we're trying to make sure we're being less siloed and working more as a system, thinking the same way about our infrastructure. So there's a lot of that discussion taking place now, a heavy focus on standards, as you heard. You know, we've got that's an area where we actually have centralized a standards office where we were more decentralized because we thought that that was going to be so important to the future of the organization and the profession, working on standards and trying to really push that into all the different technical areas. Structural Engineering Institute has been a leader in that, but we need all the different institutes driving standards as well. As a floor, not a ceiling, because we recognize the standard, you know, standards are, you know, they're not the be-all, end-all. We want to push innovation. We want performance-based standards and not prescriptive standards, but we do think that that's increasingly important.
If I may add, you know, I joined ASCE in 1980. I'm a life member, which means designation old, right? I think it's given after 40 years or so. But I can tell you it's a dynamic organization. As the environment changes, actually ASCE, based on my experience as a member, they try to figure out where that environment will be in the future and align their strategic plan accordingly. And and this is organizationally. We have what's called the CTA, the Committee on Technical Advancement, which I chaired a few years ago. CTA, in my opinion, is more like an incubator for emerging items and challenges facing our community. And it will end up leading to an institute. If you look at the financial model, which I mean, Tom could speak about that, it's changing. Open source documents, publications, federal requirement that it has to be open source. We are rethinking all of this. We had a task force that was focusing on open source for documents and so on. The financial model, the need for supporting the government and partnering with the government, such as NOAA and NIST and FEMA and USGS, which has information as well as financial potential benefits for ASCE. The scope of coverage, the need for this cross-cutting coverage. If you look at the manuals of practice that I put in the back, it doesn't reside, you can't fit it in one institute. It has to come across many institutes. Economics is a key central element of it. Social sciences, right? It's an important item. Public infrastructure is defined as being not only what we build, but the people and the economy and the environment, all together defining that public infrastructure. And I think ASCE, if anything, I could say it is at the forefront compared to other societies. And sometimes it is a model that's followed by other societies. We still have, we still have 4 minutes. Any more questions?
If there aren't more questions, I can always do just one or two little housekeeping things.
Sure.
First, we had a request from the online folks to please identify yourself when you're speaking, especially if you're not standing at the podium where a camera can see you. I'm kind of going to move up to the front so people can see me. And I'm also going to follow my own advice here and introduce myself. My name's Matt Roberts. I work for ASCE. I do AV stuff. So when you do ask a question, please identify yourself to the online audience so they know who is speaking. Additionally, it is really important that you wait for a microphone. When Tom started his remarks this morning, we had about 60 people online. We are now up to about 75. So we have a very large audience online with us, and it's important that they get to get the full experience here as well. Thank you all very much for being here. Thank you for your time.
Yeah, I'd like to add that in the online program, if you find the program, just search for ASCE NOAA Workshop 2025, and you'll find the program. There are hyperlinks to the bios. So we are going to keep the introduction brief, but you could read more details about the panelists and the speakers at their bios there. Any more comments or questions? I think we